Hey, welcome to Ultimate Survival Tips. I'm David. Today we're going to continue our series called Knife Sharpening Bootcamp. We're going to show you how to get sharp, pointy knives every time. In this series, we're going to take a look at things like stone sharpeners, field sharpeners, tool sharpeners, gizmos and gadgets, bench sharpeners, just about any other kind of sharpener you can imagine. Today I'm going to show you how to put the finishing touch on your blades, take them from sharp to razor sharp. Before we're all done, I'm going to show you how to make and use a leather strop. Let's get started. Okay, so in session 2, we looked at how to use an old school sharpening technique, a really cheap, basic sharpening stone, and a wood wedge that we talked about in session 1 of this series to get a really sharp edge on our new Schrade knife. But it's not razor sharp. We can get this thing a lot sharper. So I'm going to show you how to get a really sharp blade, just about razor sharp, using stropping. So let me move these things out of the way. So for this session, obviously we're going to need our knife. So for the base of your strop, you can use just about any kind of scrap wood. I've just got a bunch of 2x4s here, some other stuff that's just cut down. You could use the thick end of a shim, like this. And the big thing is that when we make a strop, we need to have something that's thick enough so that when we're stropping, our hand doesn't scrape against the table. So something small like this that would be more handheld could be like a field strop that you could throw in your bug out bag or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to move this stuff. We'll talk more about wood later. And okay, next we're going to need some sort of leather. Now this leather here, it was just from some sort of a leather making kit. I'm probably going to use this piece. But if you don't have a whole bunch of access to leather, you could use something like this old tool pouch. You could use even the back of a glove. These are some welding gloves. If you've got some old leather laying around, you can use that kind of stuff. We'll talk more about leather in a couple minutes. And we're going to need some 5-minute epoxy, something to stir the epoxy with, a razor blade, and we're going to need some honing compound, and all this stuff we'll talk about in a few minutes. So to start, we want to select our wood base, and that's going to kind of be dependent upon what you want to use your strop for. If you want to do like a field sharpening strop that was kind of portable and you just were going to hold it in your hand, you could use something thin like this. If you're going to use a bench strop for thinner, smaller knives, something like this might work good. But our knife is fairly sizable, so I like to get something fairly close to the length of the blade. So I'm going to use this piece here. So we're going to make a strop, then I'm going to show you how to polish your blade. And that's basically all stropping is. You're polishing your blade. You end up with a bunch of micro grooves on your edge after using even the finest sharpening stone. And the strop's really going to smooth your blade out and polish it. And actually, if you maintain your knife by stropping, you may not have to sharpen it but every couple of months, maybe even every 6 months. And a testimony to that is I do some wood carving. I've got various wood carving blades in here. Now these carving blades, they have never been sharpened. All I've ever done to keep these blades sharp is stropping them. Doing a few strops every day might be all you need to keep your knife sharp all the time. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to cut the leather and then we're going to glue it to this wood. Now leather usually has a smooth side and a suede side. I prefer the suede side. It actually gives you a real nice tactile feel when you're stropping the blade. You can actually feel that edge getting honed down, and we'll talk more about that as we go. Another thing with leathers is you want a leather that's not too thick or too thin. My basic rule of thumb is leather that's a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch or 1.5 to 3 millimeters. It's probably going to work pretty good. Now it's going to be really important to select a piece of wood too that's perfectly flat, and you want leather that's going to flatten out real nice once you stick it onto the wood. So now we're going to cut our leather. So I'm just going to turn this upside down and find the best side. Okay, and I'm just going to align this. Since it's kind of squared off, this is not an exact science. I'm just going to, it's kind of actually pretty easy. I'm just going to cut this edge here. I'm going to use my razor blade for that, and you can see it's not perfect, but that's going to be perfectly fine. Okay, there we go. Line it up. We've got just a little bit of a spot down here to kind of hold onto the strop without tainting the leather. And next thing we're going to do is grab our 5-minute epoxy. I love this stuff. Okay. And let's see how far this is going to go down. It's going to go down to about there. So let's just start down here. Make sure we get stuff coming out of both sides. Get it on there. That should be good enough. You got to work pretty fast with this stuff because it will set up on you. I'm just going to grab my stick here. We're going to just, a lot of times I mix this in like a plastic lid or something. Here, I'm just going to kind of work it all together. Mix it right on this wood. It saves a step, and this should work out just fine. Pretty heavy on it here, so I'm just going to skim some off the sides here. Used a little bit too much, but that'll be fine. Okay, next thing. Just going to kind of make sure we have some epoxy underneath this whole thing. Now this is going to set up pretty quick. I'm just going to turn this upside down and make sure I don't shift it. Just kind of apply pressure for a little bit. I'm going to clean up some of these edges while it's still soft, because I used too much epoxy. I made a mess. Okay, so while we were letting this dry, which actually took about 12 minutes, not 5 minutes, because I'm working in my shop, which is in my basement. It's a little bit cooler down here. I decided to put a 10-pound weight on top of my cut 2x4 piece here, and just to keep it flat, keep everything tight, and just make sure that we didn't have any bumps or bubbles on the bottom of this leather that could mess things up. So let's ditch this weight. And I see that I was kind of messy on the edges. Not too bad, but there's a couple of spots where the epoxy actually leaked out the sides, and I'm just going to get my razor blade and trim these sections off just a little bit wherever that epoxy kind of ended up on top of the leather, and that should be perfectly fine. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our Yellowstone. Now you could strop your blade and polish it up without any compound, but the compound's going to make your stropping a lot quicker. So I use a Yellowstone that is actually kind of hard to find. This is the stuff that wood carvers use. It's the stuff I've always used. Now there's a bunch of green stuff out there. I'm sure that works fine too. I just have a preference. This is called Yellowstone. I'll put a link to it in the video description. But you know, this stuff's basically kind of like a big crayon. And you just go ahead and you rub it all up on your leather like this. That's probably good. Okay, now our stropping, basically what we're doing is we're going back and forth. Now we can kind of, I don't know if you can hear that. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of go back and forth like this. You can actually kind of feel when there's just a hair resistance on the strop. You have kind of like a little amplified sound coming off of there. A little bit of a scratching sound. Now one of the ways that I test sharpness is just relative sharpness. Take a razor blade, and we can kind of see how well that blade went through the paper. Then we just compare the look of our knife cut to our razor blade cut, and when they're about the same, we know our knife's approaching razor sharp. Now in the next session, I'm going to show you 3 ways to safely test the sharpness of any blade. So don't miss session 4. Oh, before I forget, I want to thank Russell Taylor and the kind folks at Taylor Brands, the makers of Smith & Wesson and Schrade knives, for helping me make this series possible. You guys rock! For your convenience, I've included links to the gear that I've mentioned, other videos in the Knife Sharpening Bootcamp series in the video description on YouTube. We've just taken a look at how to make and use a leather strop, finish off your knife edges, and make them razor sharp. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And for more gear reviews, survival tips, and survival news, check out ultimatesurvivaltips.com. While you're there, grab our monthly survival e-mag, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter to get the latest news and be the first to hear about the great gear giveaway contests we have planned. Okay, this is David. I hope to see you on the other side, and remember, be prepared because you never know.